Shabbat Shalom. Got your blue books? Got your Chumashim?
I'll figure it out.
Okay, let's do a little work together. Exodus 39. Exodus 39. I want you to go to verse 22. Exodus 39, verse 22. Page 683. Let me know when you get there. Okay. My experience of the Torah is often that it's boring until it's not. And what I mean by that is, like many sort of books that you have to sink your teeth into, like either your first read through it, you're sort of like, what's the point? And this is one of those passages, by the way, that you really have to break open in order to understand what's the point. Because otherwise, it's going to read like the minutes from the last synagogue board meeting. And so what I wanted you to do is I want you to look at verse 32, if you don't mind. So Exodus 29, verse 32. Thus was completed all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. And then we're also going to look at verse 42. So we're 10 verses apart from one another. Here's how it goes, so we don't have to send the microphone around. Thus was completed all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. Just so you know, when Jews of a certain generation felt insecure, they reverted to Greek. Why? I don't know. So tabernacle is a Greek word, which is just as untranslatable as Mishkan, which basically means the first synagogue that ever was. That's what we're talking about. The mobile synagogue, the tent, the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. The Israelites did so, just as Hashem commanded Moses, so they did. You with me? Doesn't immediately jump off the page as a verse. Look at verse 42, something very, very similar. And by the way, for those who have eyes to see, look at the order that things come in verse 42. You there with me? Just as Adonai had commanded Moses, so the Israelites had done all the work. Anything you notice there? Comparing between verse 42 and verse 32? They are reversed. Same statement, same sentence, in reverse order. If you are a knowledgeable reader of the Torah, as many of you are, one of the things that you should know is that long since discovered is this is the way Torah's way of saying pay attention to what happens in the middle. It has this thing where it sort of bookends important parts of the Torah, and the way you know it is it'll say one thing and then it'll say it in the opposite order, and what's in the middle is important. And by the way, what's in the middle is the description of everything that ever went into building the first synagogue that ever was. It gives you the list of it all. By the way, we've been spending weeks on all of this building. It gives you the list of it all from beginning to end. It tells you all the stuff that was in there. And it says, just as God commanded, so do the people do. And what's the miracle here? When have the people ever done exactly as they were commanded? No, there's something, for those of you, and if you were in the Torah study on Wednesday, I brought this up as well. If you were involved in building this building, you know what I'm talking about. When does it go to plan? Can it go to plan? And the idea that these people, by the way, who just built a golden calf, have actually come together for this huge communal project that the Torah tells us every single one of them was involved into. And how did they finish it? Exactly as they were instructed to do it. I don't know if I believe it. I don't know if I believe it. Right? Because what's important about this section of Torah is not just sort of a statement, okay, we're done, we can move on to the other thing. This was the first communal project they ever did. And it was done perfectly. It was done beautifully. Another thing that I want to bring up for you, just to sort of, I'm going to do a thing you're not supposed to do in sermons, critique me later, which is I'm going to transition to a different topic without warning. Here's my warning. What's the problem with building a Mishkan? There's a fundamental paradox at the heart of what it means to build a Mishkan. Remember, the word Mishkan comes from the root shochin, which means to dwell. You are building a house for God. What's the problem? God can't be contained in a house. And so one of the things that's interesting about this particular thing is that this project and the project later on, when we get to the actual building of the temple, when Solomon gets up there and he's put forced labor on the entire country in order, like there's been a tax levy, in order to do this, build this temple, and you know what his first question is? Can God be contained in a house? Maybe you should have asked that a bit earlier in the process. At what part of the strategic plan do you start asking that question? And so my general question here is sort of like, what were they doing exactly? What was the point of this construction project? Why did it matter when at the end of the day, by the way, there's a beautiful midrash that says, God says, I'm very modest, says God. Not a great sign when somebody says it. but it's a very sensitive read. God says, I'm very modest. He says, the whole world is the place where I reside. But what do I ask from you? About 10 cubits by 10 cubits. That's all I need. Right? Because the Holy of Holies was actually a very sort of small kind of space. Do you sort of get what I'm getting at with this paradox of how do you build for holiness? And I think that the answer here is that what you do is you not just build for holiness, you build with holiness. And really what's happening in this building of the Mishkan is that it's serving as a corrective, a spiritual corrective, for what happened with the golden calf. If you read the story of the golden calf, and you can go back and do it, it's wild. First of all, it happens very quickly. And basically the image, the word that they use for when the women and the men take off all of their jewelry and throw it in the fire, it doesn't use the word for take off, it uses the word for break off. It seems like it was almost orgiastic in the way that it was happening. People were running and there were no plans, and somehow or another, Aaron, after on his own, was able to chisel this golden calf into existence. The Midrash picks up on the speed with which this project happens and says, it was actually magic. What Aaron did was he took all the jewelry and he threw it into the fire, and poof, there was a golden calf. And then after the golden calf there, what did the people do? Spring break. I mean, that was essentially it, right? All the elements, the drinking and the sex and the dancing and the loss of inhibition. That's what the golden calf was about. The golden calf was about the response to anxiety being loss of inhibition. We're so worried about where Moses is, nothing matters. And this is the opposite of that. It's a very different kind of project. In your minds, how do you conceive of this project? What's the statement behind this project? What statement is the community trying to make in terms of what it wants to say about itself in this project, which is taken, by the way, 3 parshas of the Torah, which is a lot of Torah real estate. And I'm just going to suggest that what it's trying to do is to be mindful about how the community comes together. I don't know, by the way, if the Mishkan, the way that the Mishkan turned out, was exactly as God intended it. Because I personally have never had the experience of saying, I would really like it, what if it came out this way, and then it actually comes out this way. But I do wonder if after seeing the way that it all came together, the Holy One said, this might not have been exactly what I intended, but it's what I wanted. The entire people joined together as one. Tomorrow, this community is going to come together to consider the draft of an action plan, the draft of a community position that's going to help guide us as best we can over the next 12 months. Hard to know how to navigate the stormy seas that we're in. Hard to know when to run with the wind and when to tack against it. Hard to know what's effective and what's not. hard to join the parts of all the people together. Hard to know where it is we agree and where it is we don't exactly agree. Hard to know where the energy is and hard to know where the commitment is. Hard to know whether what we're doing matters. But the thing I want to say in praise of the way that this community has come together is that a month ago, 250 of you showed up and really just told us with sincerity what you thought about how we could act as one. And then a very small team of 5 people had to go through over 100 pages of information in order to make it real. But for a moment, before we even get there, let me speak in praise of you and in praise of this, which is that the community's response to all of our anxiety and all of our uncertainty was to act mindfully. I don't know that what the team will present will be perfect. I don't know if it will be everything that everybody wanted it to be. I'm sure there are places here and there where people might even have strong feelings about what's in that proposal or in that position. But the thing that I ask you to see is that it is not just about the finished project of the building that the team was aiming for, but rather the finished project of what it means to build together that we're going for. And ultimately, when it says in the Psalms that the Holy One is Yotzer Yachad Libam, that the Holy One joins our hearts together, created our hearts together, that this is what it's trying to do, to find a way that we, as diverse and different as we all are, right, can be deeply connected and step forward in the same direction. Remember that the purpose of the Mishkan was to move with the people. Hopefully this will too. I want you to recognize that there's something special about all of you. Because not every community could have or would have done this. It says something about our hearts. Shabbat Shalom.